Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cold War Prepper. My name is Lee, and this evening we have a very special friend from the other part of Texas. Actually, he's halfway to my hometown, which is still in Texas, and that's the halfway point to get to California, believe it or not. But anyhow, one of my favorite characters, and there are three of us that kind of hang out together and share an awful lot. Texas Redleg, the roaming prepper, and me. And so this evening we're very, very lucky to have the roaming prepper. And Pete is just a phenomenal guy. He is an aerospace engineer. And if you didn't catch his video earlier today about his thoughts about the balloon, I strongly encourage you to go back and visit that. And he and I were chatting beforehand, and I got so excited talking to him. I need to go to the other room, pick up one more photo that I printed off. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to let Pete introduce himself. So, Pete, please tell everybody all about yourself for at least 2 minutes.
No, I can burn up a couple of minutes. I like to talk about stuff. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pete. I go by the Roaming Prepper on YouTube. I normally don't sound like Yoda or Nick Nolte, but unfortunately, I either have the flu or the Rona, and so I've been battling that for the last 4 days. And so I got flu Rona or spy flu. I don't know, take your pick, balloon Rona. So my channel specifically started because I'm a prepper who likes to travel, and I have to for work, and I realized that's kind of a challenge being prepped when you're on the road. And I realized I'm not the only one dealing with that, and that's kind of where my whole channel took off. Lee's right. I'm an aerospace engineer by degree. I have a 4-year aerospace engineering degree, and uh, and also an MBA. And I started this because I had a lot of 20-year-olds in my kids' circle going, "Well, Mr. Pete, you really need to put that on YouTube." So I said, "Fine." One day I said, "I'm going to put it on YouTube. Let's see what happens." And here I am. So anyway, Lee, thank you for that phenomenal introduction, though.
Well, no, you are phenomenal. So thank you so much for being a part of my circle of friends. And I really, really appreciate that. Um, so what I would like to do is we've got two different perspectives here. Okay. So, one is, of course, I had 21 years in communications intelligence, signals intelligence, specifically in communications intelligence. I was a 98 Gulf Russian, which is a Russian voice intercept operator, and I was a 98 Bravo, which is a Russian code breaker for 21 years. And then you've got your experience, and you were talking about the size of a nuclear device and everything else. If you can kind of recap for us real quickly the fantastic video that you did earlier today, and let's use that as a jumping point to where from there we can talk about FODENT and we can talk about SIGINT.
Right. No, sure. So a lot of folks, we all saw the balloon go through the US, which Lee and I have agreed that's something that never would have happened 15 years ago. They wouldn't have even attempted it. But lo and behold, it happened. Um, a lot of folks, after I did a short video last week, reached out and said, "Hey, well, could it have been one of various things?" One person reached out about an EMP device, like a capacitor of some type, way too heavy for a balloon, would be very hard to control. Someone else thought a small nuke. You would need a decent amount of weight, just not just the uranium, which is very heavy, but also the housing. It has to detonate a certain way. And with a balloon, there's no guarantee a good storm will take it somewhere else. Some folks thought biological, which is possible as well. I wasn't putting that high, but higher than an EMP. But signal intelligence at that altitude, a lot of our signals will hit the ionosphere and bounce around. And these guys may have just been sitting there and collecting data. Also, taking photos from that altitude, you're not going through all of the atmosphere like a satellite would. So, all possible. I'm thinking this was a political stunt as well as signal collection. And I'm curious to see what Lee thinks of that because that was your specialty. That was your MOS for a very long time.
Yes. So I printed some stuff off the web because I'm always, even though it's been more than 10 years, I still have to be very, very cautious in what I say and I don't say. I was lucky to be part of the ground floor of a special operation in Field Station Augsburg. I spent 7 years in Augsburg, Germany. Let me tell you, that was the most marvelous assignment I've ever had in my life. So I was part of something called La Ferravite. So this is a picture of one of four intercept bays at Field Station Augsburg, and this is back in the 1970s up through I think 1988. So this is you can see basically there's two receivers per operator, a set of uh, and you can look this up here on YouTube on uh, the internet as well. But each operator had two receivers, so you're listening to one part of the discussion in one ear, and the other part in the other ear. You've got a recorder, just all kinds of things. So, what does that look like as far as Field Station Augsburg itself? And the so this, imagine that there are four of these. Okay, so you put those together, and this is Field Station Augsburg back in the 1970s. So if I can see here, you can see the parking lot here, the entrance place. This is the mess hall. So this is 4 battalions of people. Roughly, you had around 1,000 intercept operators operating in here in any one day. Where I was working was back down here in the southern quarter, down in here. That's where those 4 bays are. And then this is an AN/FLR9 intercept and direction finding antenna. So that was part of an array that we had 9 of those throughout the world. And so that kind of gives you an idea of, number one, the size of the radio equipment that you've got to. So we were talking about a balloon that had 3 school bus size buses underneath of it worth of equipment. So if you take what we had at Field Station Augsburg and you say, well, there's 24 intercept radios per bay, we could probably fit in both bays into those 3. So we're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 48 intercept radios. Now, things have really been digitized and brought down quite a bit since the 1980s when that happened, I'm sure. But, that's kind of what it would look like. You would have a whole bunch of intercept equipment. The next question you say is, well, that sounds like you got to have intercept operators up there operating it. Well, no, you don't, because since the 1970s, we've had another piece of equipment, the AN RC12 guardrail. So every corps has a company of these communications intercept airplanes. So this is the RC12 guardrail. It's been replaced. But the one thing I want to point out is look at the number of our antennas on it. Okay. If you take a look at the picture, if you take a look at Field Station Augsburg here and the Flare 9, if you take a look at guardrail, and then if you take a look at my favorite assignment I was ever at, and this was a remote intercept site on the east-west German border. And this is Field Detachment Wolbeck. If you notice here, there are 5 unidirectional VHF intercept antennas, and up here you have your SHF and UHF intercept antennas, and then up here you have communications antennas. So if I intercept something from the enemy, it doesn't do me any good unless I'm communicating it to somebody. Okay. So the one thing that we noticed that was ostensibly absent in the photographs that we saw, which were pretty good resolution, we could see the solar panels. We didn't see any intercept antennas. Not only did we not see any intercept antennas, we didn't see any transmission and reception antennas.
So it's very possible they could have had, if not signal collecting information, the package to take the high resolution photographs would not have been that big. It would not need to be that big. They could have done that and then operated that via SAT. Because if you're 25 miles, your distance from that balloon to a satellite to drop comms up and come around wouldn't be that hard. So if they're not doing a big data collection, They could definitely do
And it could also be passive so that they don't
true.
have to send real-time photographs via radio communications. And that's kind of where I'm getting is
It's just
I don't
collecting.
think unless they're recording it, okay, unless there's a humongous recorder of some sort and they downloaded all the information and they're going to access it after the balloon lands, SIGINT, in my opinion, is out the window. Just two last pictures. This is what we use for ground intercept in a tactical division. So you've got two of these per platoon, three platoons to accompany you. So you've got six of these in a division. This is the Turkey 32 teammate. You've got two intercept operators inside. It's a crew of four because you've got two people working 12-hour shifts, but one of them has to stand guard duty. So you're really working 18 hours a day and sleeping six. And this is the antenna, intercept antenna. So you got four intercept antennas up top. What you do is it's a time distance of arrival, angle of arrival. So you take all four antennas and you measure the time difference that the signal arrives at those fours, and it gives you a line of bearing. And if you get three lines of bearing, then you can direction find. This is the replacement. So if you notice, this is on the old Dodge
But
5/4 ton
you have
truck.
to keep in mind, Lee, for instance, when I was out on the rigs, when we transmit data from location, we had a 1 meter dish, so one guy had to carry this monstrosity. We're getting the same transmissibility with a much smaller dish uh, and package. So right now it's truck mounted. So yeah,
Yeah,
the tech moved very quick in the last 10 years, but to your point, you couldn't make out a lot of antennas,
no.
but
And
we
so
don't know
so
what
this
else
is on
was
the
there.
old. You can tell this is an old Dodge Ram after we got rid of the 3/4 ton because the hood is up. One of the things, a couple things they forgot to do tactically when we were replacing the old 3/4 ton Dodge was they didn't give us anti-glare windows. So when you're out in a field environment, the glare from the windshield was a signature that anybody could see. They forgot to turn off the tail lights. If you stepped on the brakes, you told everybody where you were.
You told
I
everyone
mean,
where you were. Yep.
yeah, it was crazy. So this is the newer version, same shelter, but it's just mounted on a Humvee. But anyhow, I just wanted to share that in my opinion, there's nothing there that indicates to me that it was SIGINT, ELINT, unless it was a very passive system. But I don't even see collection antennas. So it has to be FODENT. So I think you and I are coming to a common agreement that it's FODENT.
Yeah, I don't think it was any kind of delivery system for some kind of large scale weapon. Although it's conceivable it would have been done differently. They were trying to retrieve or collect something. Uh, and to your point, now, quick question: that first picture, the bank of computers,
Uh-huh.
those aren't Fortran based, are they? I'm showing my age here.
Oh, you aren't going to believe this. But the controlling computer was an ANUYC 8, a Yuck 8. It was an octal computer that was actually it was the battleship fire direction control computer on the USS Missouri. And they
Oh
took it
wow!
off the Missouri and brought it to us, and then that became the framework for the entire
And you had to
computer
make the
system that we had.
tapes to back up your data
Yeah.
because there was no USB drive.
No, no, no. If you notice, we've still got reel-to-reel tapes. Okay, up here. This is all
Oh
reel to
yeah.
reel.
Hey, I remember in some of the old oil field units, we had to, and they were few and far between, but we had to run film through a thermal printer, the blue line with the ammonia, to get a hard
Yep.
copy of whatever data we put on the film. So yeah, that's some. I don't think people realize how far the technology's come in a relatively short period of time.
Oh
But
gosh, our Morse intercept operators were banging away when they were listening to Morse code, and they had 6-ply paper. So they had to have 6 pages of paper and 5 pages of carbon that they had to type with. So you'd see, and we called them monkeys because man, they had to really pound on those keyboards to get that letter all the way through all that paper and carbon.
God, that's crazy. And it's interesting that this this thing wasn't stopped in the Pacific or when it went over the tundra in Canada. I'm sure the Canadian Air Force would have happily shot it down too.
Well, now our press secretary today had a reason for that. It's because there were three unidentifiable balloons that have been identified as coming across and not being shot down during the Trump administration. Therefore, the Biden administration was not going to shoot down an unidentifiable balloon.
That that clown, it's the Gong Show, but in real life. I absolutely can't compute the rationale. I'm also thinking targeting. Uh, you're getting a very precise video or photographic confirmation of a hell of a lot of missile silos. Um, if you look at some of the old Cold War videos, actually Canada put one out called the Battle Over the Plains or something. It was one of those educational documentaries,
Mhm.
and they basically said the Russian plan in like North Dakota, they kind of knew where the bases were. They were just going to pepper the heck out of the area with 1 kiloton bombs until they destroyed all the silos. And we just allowed these guys to just meander over them with
But we
God
don't
knows
have
what.
anything to hide, and the reason is that you have to remember the protocols we established with the Soviet Union,
With
actually
the
with
SALT
Russia.
treaty.
Yeah, when the Soviet Union fell, and we convinced the Ukrainians to give the Ukrainians had more nukes than the Russians
I remember that.
when the Soviet Union fell. And so we convinced them to destroy those and get rid of them. And both Russia and the US guaranteed protection in case anybody ever attacked them because of their giving up of their nukes.
Mhm.
And but as a result of that, we wanted to have the SALT inspection teams. So the US had to verify with lat long every single launcher we had, and then we had when the Soviet satellites were overhead, we had to open the doors to show whether a nuke was in there or not, so that they could do an accurate count of how many nukes we had in the silos.
And they did the same.
And they did the same.
But that
So
was with
there's no
Russia, not
need.
with China.
Well, China and Russia are pretty much simpatico here in the last decade or
Yeah,
two.
lately,
Now,
yes, absolutely.
which is really kind of strange because I guess, it's that theory of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because they've been fighting over the Ussuri River border, gosh, since 1945. And they would have quite frequent conflicts or little battles over the Ussuri River and whether or not it changed course and should be in China or should be in Russia. And that just came to an end here just about 2002 or so.
Hmm. Well, Clancy had predicted those two would get into it at some point. So I don't know if the late Mr. Clancy will be proven wrong, but
I
um,
here's what I'm not 100% convinced of. Uh, if Xi Jinping is encouraging Господин Putin to go ahead and use up all of his assets to try to take over Ukraine, notice that he's already pulled all of his Siberian divisions off the Ussuri River
I
and
noticed
back
that.
towards Ukraine. So there is nothing protecting Sibir at all from
No,
the Chinese if the Chinese want to invade. It is theirs for the taking.
and there are some prolific oil fields as well as gold and rare earth metals in those mountains.
Yep, yep. There's a reason they had all those uh, political prisoners digging holes in the ground in Kamchatka.
Oh yeah, no doubt. That's not a place I have high on my vacation and travel list. Just want to throw that out there to everybody. You don't want to go there.
Oh no.
So I'm curious where this is going to go. You heard China's response was, we have the right to protect the property of our country and our companies. Well, that basically implies that the country owns the companies. Um, if Chevron went and lost a bunch of drilling rigs somewhere, the US government would be like, "Oh, well, sucks to suck, buddy. You shouldn't have gone there." But China
Right.
made it very clear that they were very upset by our downing of a civilian balloon, which they should care less about.
Well,
So,
the whole thing is, if we are in a period of détente, which I think went out the window when Trump left.
yeah,
Um,
I
but
agree.
if we were in a period of détente and I had something that looked suspicious and I was concerned about not wanting to ruffle your feathers, I would pick up the phone. I'd say, "Hey, I've got an incident going on. There's nothing to worry about. It's it is this, and we're going. If you will let it through, let it go by. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. However, we also understand international protocol, and if you shoot it down, we won't be happy. But that's part of our mistake for not controlling it. Now, what's the probability of having three within a week that you lose control over?
Not very good. So
Yeah.
there was the one we all followed, the
Uh-huh.
one in South America. Where was the third one?
Supposedly, there's a third one that went over the Aleutian Islands, and then it self-deflated after it went over the Aleutian Islands
Hmm.
and went into the, Gulf of Alaska.
Did we recover that one? I'm curious.
Oh, I think it's too deep there.
I'm pretty sure China may want to try and get it. You
Oh,
never
they
know.
probably will. They probably will, but,
Hmm.
I mean, it does everything looks suspicious, and intentions and everything else, and it's just crazy. Let me
So
do a real quick here with
go
everybody.
for it.
Hey, everybody. So let me tell you something. We are very, very lucky because Pete, the roaming prepper, has come down with a very debilitating uh, cough and lung congestion that he is not feeling too well. So we're very lucky to have him here for as long as we can keep him before his throat gives out and his lungs give out. In the meantime, if I can get my moderators to do me a favor, we're going to try to get as many people following as many other people here on this channel tonight. Prepping by Faith, I know you're great at doing that. Hello, Tofu, you're fantastic at doing that. But if I could get my mods to start putting other people's links, when you do that, do me a favor and list the number of subscribers they currently have. Then each of you, as you subscribe to one of those other people, put down the number of subscriber you are to that person so that they can track and see where we are as far as getting them um, uh, new subscribers so we can get people following. And of course, we want the first one to be the roaming prepper. Thank you, Prepping by Faith. I had full faith that you did. But Loretta says she doesn't have a channel. Okay. For those of you who don't have a channel, thank you very much for supporting everybody else. We greatly appreciate it. So, and if I have been terrible, I've been focusing on Pete, and I've been terrible about focusing on the chat. So if you have any questions, please put them in all caps, especially
Oh yeah.
anything right now for the roaming prepper before he his voice gives out on him and we lose him. But he underwent Ice Mageddon in Midland, and we've got it here in our area. And I tell you, it's not been fun. It's been kind of
No.
now you were where were you when it actually hit? You were off flying around, gallivanting around,
So
weren't
I
you?
was actually visiting my son for his pre-deployment out in Schofield Barracks. So I was in Oahu actually, and what before we left, we knew that we had looked at the weather, not just there, but coming back, and we thought that's not going to be a pretty sight. So we actually left. This is one of those cases where we left a cache of goodies for ourselves. I had reserved the hotel for for the return flight because I knew I wasn't going to drive after a flight like that.
Yeah.
But we had all the warm weather or the cold weather clothes in the pickup truck. So as soon as we landed, we had jeans and t-shirts and a hoodie, and we ran to our truck. We changed in the truck, and off we went. Um, one of the important things is folks remember if you're traveling, don't just look at the weather where you're going, look at the weather coming back. Um, because there were some families came back and landed in Austin, and they were in swim trunks and t-shirts, and they froze their butts.
Oh, I'm sure. So
So
when just after we got married, I was assigned to that one detachment, Wobeck. Let me see, that's this one here. So the first place my wife goes to after we get married is to a remote border site with less than 50 Americans. That's this one here. And that's actually in Schoningen, Schoninegegen, Germany, on the East-West German border at that time. We actually had East German guards that could watch us eat our breakfast in our kitchen or in
I
our
believe it.
dining room when we were that close to the border. But we flew back, and I had to go to school for 4 weeks, and and the school was right before Christmas. I said, "Well, crying out loud, we'll fly Helen back on an American plane, and get her Christmas at home, so I could take a little bit of vacation. We'd have Christmas back here in Texas, then we'd fly back to Germany."
Right.
Well, it was cheaper to fly Helen by Lufthansa, and I had to fly an American flag carrier because of my security clearance. So I was not allowed to fly a foreign aircraft. And so we left Dallas Fort Worth at the same time. I put her on her airplane. It was supposed to leave. And then, or no, yeah, my airplane was supposed to leave first, but I got her down to her area, went back, got to my airplane. It was hung up at the gate for a while. It was hung up at the gate so long that we missed our connecting flight in
Oh,
Atlanta. So we flew from Atlanta finally, and we got diverted from JFK to LaGuardia. They put us on buses to get us to JFK. So by the time I got to JFK, Helen's already halfway across the ocean. And so then we fly, and of course, I'm flying United, and she's flying Lufthansa. Lufthansa lands in anything. And so she landed in Munich on time. I got diverted to Heathrow because Germany was closed to American carriers because of the snowstorm. They finally opened it up and they said, "Okay, we're going to fly you to Berlin. You can catch a flight from Berlin down to Munich." I said, "Okay, great." We got up in the air. We're flying. We got diverted to Hamburg. Berlin was closed. So here I am in
oh,
Hamburg. Helen's been on the ground for 4 hours, has no idea how to get from Munich to Augsburg. And it was just crazy. And so I finally said, "You know what I'm going to do?" I walked over to the Lufthansa counter and I said, "Give me a ticket to Munich." And they said, "Okay." So I paid, for a ticket from from Hanover, uh, Germany, down to Munich, Germany. I got down there. She'd been there, but the thing there is the snowstorm. When we left, we didn't have full winter gear, and when we landed in
oh
Munich,
no.
we needed full winter gear.
I
So
believe it.
So make sure you pay attention. You can be diverted to other airports, and it can be hellacious if you don't have the proper equipment, clothing, and everything else with you. And the other thing you have to take into account is I can't tell you the number of times over 40 or 50 years that my luggage did not arrive at the same place that I did.
I was gonna say it. We had to go to Klingenbach, which would have been on the border with Hungary and Croatia in Austria, and our flight in was in Vienna. And I ran into a few colleagues because we were going to a conference, and we just all ran into each other at Hobby Airport in down in Houston, or I'm sorry, Bush International down in Houston, and we were on the plane together. So of course, you have a an old Vietnam vet who is a Marine. He was in the Corps in Vietnam. We had a couple of drilling guys, a couple of energy folk. It was a group of guys and girls. We hadn't seen each other in years, so we got into the schnapps in the plane. We flew KLM, landed in Amsterdam, not feeling any pain. Arrived in Vienna, took the car down to Klingenbach, and lo and behold, my boss, while we were in Amsterdam on the layover, they kind of gave me my bags as I made from Terminal A to Terminal B. I opened my bags and I reorganized everything,
uh,
and I put extra stuff in my backpack. And he said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, The trip's going too good. We're having too much fun. We're going to lose our luggage. I kid you not, Lee. We land in Vienna. Everyone's luggage is still in Amsterdam. Somebody's bag went to Paris. I don't know how that happened. And I was the only guy who had enough foresight to take out a pair of underwear, a pair of socks, toothbrush, toothpaste. So at least I could sanitize myself at the hotel.
The two absolute worst airports as far as being able to retrieve your baggage and get to another aircraft and everything else have to be Mexico City, because you've got the one runway and all of the terminals are the 7 mile length of that runway. So,
Oh, Lord.
you've got one down here and the other's down here, and you got to walk 6.5 miles in between the two of them. It's better to take a taxi to get to a different aerial company. The other one is Heathrow. The worst
I was going
experience
to
I
say
ever had in
either
Heathrow.
Heathrow or Paris.
Yeah, Charles de Gaulle's terrible too, but Heathrow, you don't want to transfer from an American plane to an Aer Lingus because the Brits hate the Irish so much that they have the absolute worst place down at the other end of the airport, and you've got to walk, 177 miles to get to Aer Lingus, and that really is terrible. But no, that's
I'm glad to
yeah.
see they.
Atlanta is, but at least Atlanta has those little buses and things like that. Dallas, it used to be that the what do you call them, sky cabs or whatever, the little
Yeah.
trams, only went one direction, and so
Oh, really?
you could be one terminal away, but you had to go the entire circuit in order to get to it. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if that's
like I
changed
like
or not.
Houston Airport, the Intercontinental Bush,
Yeah.
because it has those trains. You have a train in the basement, outside the security, and
Uh-huh.
you have a train that's elevated past the security. So even if
Oh.
you and I are going to pick up someone else and we don't want to go through security, we can go downstairs, get on that little train, and it takes you across the terminals. And the
Uh,
only thing is then you're on the outside of security. You can't
the last
go
time I
through it.
flew into Houston, I flew into Hobby,
Yeah,
and
Hobby
it was
doesn't have that, I don't think,
and it
anymore.
was the only airport.
Oh,
My
a little
freshman
while
year,
ago.
when I flew in for my freshman year at SMU, the only airport in town was Love Field, and the next year they built DFW. So that was something else.
Oh no, I believe it. I believe it. But yeah, folks, if you're gonna travel, they were talking about what happened in the Mediterranean and Turkey and Greece, that whole area. Um, that was pretty catastrophic. Folks, make sure you keep the amenities you need with your carry-on, whatever you can legally bring on the plane, because you never know. I've been through a offshore platform where we lost power in a storm, and we were just floating around like a cork, and I was in a big metal dark box. And I remember when I first started working the offshore rigs and platforms, we go through our safety training, and they say always leave your boots, a pair of pants or your coveralls, depending on what you're wearing, and a flashlight in your boots at the edge of your bed. He said, because if we catch fire, the rig is made of metal, the floor is metal. You don't want to run barefoot on a 100-degree, 115-degree metal deck because
Oh
you
my
won't go
gosh.
far. He said, keep your boots next to you at all time. And that's still to this day, Lee. I'll go to a hotel. I could be in the fanciest hotel with the company. I will have my boots, my rolled up jeans, everything in a little pile next to my bed.
Oh, yeah, and that's military too. Is
Yeah,
to make sure you have your boots right there with you, and so they call it booting and shooting, but
yep,
in a combat zone you can be in your skivvies and fight, but you got to have your boots on, got to have your weapon. That's booting and scooting, booting and
yeah.
shooting. Yeah,
No,
but
but in the military, you think, okay, combat, you got to roll out of bed, you have to, get on with it. But the image, I don't know why this stuck with me. The image of people running barefoot on this burning metal deck like a frying pan, and they're just burning up. I was like, that's horrendous. I'd rather get shot in a firefight than that.
So
It's a terrible way to go. No, no, I'm keeping my boots with me.
you were talking about your flight experiences. So my when I came back from Fuel Station Augsburg the first time from Laferville, I was single and I flew in the back of a Pan American 707 in the very back because that was where smoking was. And there was a young wife and her two children, and she was dressed up in the traditional German dirndl, which kind of
Yeah,
lifts and elevates everything and shows them and all that kinds of stuff.
right.
And
It's
so,
creates the appearance of booksomeness.
yeah, and I was, and she had these two young kids. She was, so I was over on the right side of the aisle, and they were on the left. And this one kid just really liked me and wanted to sit on my lap. And I thought that was okay until it started puking. We ran into turbulence. And of course, the very back end of the airplane gets the worst part of the turbulence. And this kid just all of a sudden, "Rrr," and I didn't have time to get a bag underneath of him. So there goes my uniform.
Oh,
And then this is why it's important you have a change of clothes with you as well. So I get the stewardess to help me. Of course, there's a whole bunch of people in the back of the airplane who are going through this because it's really bad turbulence. This one kid with its mother, both of them start heaving. They're using up all the barf bags in the airplane.
oh,
Finally land. God, finally landed in JFK. I went to the bathroom, cleaned off as much as I could, went to the uh, had to take a transport from JFK to Philadelphia, and they put me on an L1011 from Philadelphia down to Dallas.
oh, well.
But I guess the crew from the previous flight had warned this crew what had happened to me, so they put me in first class. And they had those 5 seats, and they pulled up the arms. And they had these special adapters where they could lie you down, you could be strapped in and go to sleep in first class.
Right.
I thought, wow, what a great thing. So I'm just about to fall asleep, and all of a sudden, the pilot comes on. He says, "We're in communications with our ground team, and we found out who shot JR." Well, of course, Armed Forces Radio and Television Service is always a year behind what the U.S. has. So we didn't even know JR had been shot yet. But here I am. I'm going to find out on an L1011 flying home to Texas who shot JR. And so that happened. And I go, wow, okay. And then all of a sudden I heard this voice and I couldn't make it out because I was kind of half groggy asleep. And I noticed that there were no attendants at all anywhere. They were all up, at the very front of first class. So I unshackled myself. There were only 2 of us in first class. And I walked up and it was Willie Nelson. So
Oh, no kidding.
I spent the rest of the flight with Willie Nelson and all the attendants at the front row of first class on this L1011 from Philadelphia to Dallas.
Man, that's a story for the books there, buddy.
So
I'll
that
tell
was
you
something
what.
else.
Oh man. Yeah, Willie Nelson, that's where was he coming from?
Philadelphia?
Okay, that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
just something else. Wow.
And then
But
the biggest mistake I ever made in my life was in 1971. I was at DLI studying basic Indonesian Malay, and the Defense Language Institute is 6 miles away from the venue where they have the Monterey Jazz Festival. And 71 was the last year that either Janis Joplin or not Eric Clapton, guitar player.
oh, not Chaplin.
Uh, Probably the
I think
best
I know who
guitar
you're
player
talking about.
ever on earth. And but anyhow, that was their last year that they were at Monterey, and I didn't go.
Oh man.
Talk about a sin.
At least to see Joplin.
Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, speaking of Hendrix, so my last guard unit, we had this very tall, distinguished gentleman, last name Hendrix. And I mean he was 6'6", but he was a big string bean of a guy.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember what we were doing. And me being me, because you guys have seen my personality, I looked at him and went, "You don't happen to have a guitar signed by the Jimi Hendrix?" And he goes, No, but I got pictures of him holding me when I was little because he was my uncle.
Wow. Wow.
And Jimi Hendrix, people don't realize he was a tall guy. He was like,
Yeah.
and this Hendrix fellow, he was, at least 6'4", 6'5", big, tall, thin guy, super
Uh,
nice guy. And he said, I don't remember. He said, I'm in the picture. I'm like that big.
um, I, I, I've got two kind of like that. One is when I was taking basic Russian in Monterey, there was a guy in my class by the name of Michael Heinlein. And so I just asked him, your dad isn't Robert, or you don't have a relative named Robert Heinlein, do you? He says, yeah, it's my uncle. He says, do you want to meet him? And I said, well, I'd love to. And so Robert Heinlein lived in Big Sur, just south of Pebble Beach, Monterey area. And we drove down there one weekend, and this is a fortress. It's got, concertina wire, uh, fence and everything else. And so he pushed a little thing on the gate and said, hey, um, uncle, this is this is Michael, and come to visit. He says, go away.
Oh,
That was it. Just go away. And we left. And I didn't get to meet his uncle. He was just totally paranoid and had his own little enclave there, just away from
wow.
everybody else. It was something else.
That's like that song. Oh God, I can't remember it. Who's Knocking? You remember that one?
Yeah, that was a Beatles song.
Yeah, that the guy's all paranoid.
Yep, yep. So and then the other one was we Operation. Oh, what was it called? I forget. We went down to Eglin Air Force Base, and I had this young sergeant, John Custer, and John was a big Boston Red Sox fan, and it was the World Series. He says, "Hey, can I take my um, TV down and watch the World Series?" I said, "Yeah, but I don't want to see it and I don't want to hear it." He was operating out of one of those Turkey 32s I showed you a picture of.
Right.
And so what he did was he bought 4 ponchos and enough extension cord where he could plug into the generator and some headphones. And he went away from the generator, covered himself with ponchos so nobody could see him, and had his headphones on. He was wanting to listen for the um, World Series. And all of a sudden he started yelling for me. So I couldn't find him. So I ran over to the generator, found his extension cord,
It
followed
ran
the
out.
extension cord to where he had his little hide and picked it up and, said, what? And he says, I've got the drop coordinates for the 82nd, because this was 82nd Airborne fighting the 24th Infantry Division. 24th Infantry Division was defending, and we were at Eglin Air Force Base. I said, really? He said, yeah. So I got it, wrote a report, and sure enough, we had all of our battalions encircling the drop zones when the 82nd dropped in the next day.
Oh, no
And
kidding.
so we got that accident. We got the drop frequencies from the Pathfinders accidentally by monitoring a UHF television.
Oh, wow.
Just totally
That's
accidental.
just
But
that's just funny.
yeah, they had to
But
start the whole exercise all
back
over
to the
again.
original signal intelligence, you never know.
Oh
If
no.
you're not careful, you never know what you're going to give away. I mean, who would have thought those guys on the 82nd were like, well, some knucklehead with an extension cord and a little portable radio slash TV is going to intercept our comms.
So the one thing you probably did not pick up on was the name. His name was John Custer, and his great
Oh,
grandfather was George Armstrong Custer.
oh,
And so John and of course George Armstrong Custer was at Fort Riley, which is where we were from, the 337th ASA
right.
Company. And when in 1867, when Colonel Armstrong left to fight the Battle of Little Bighorn, he said, "Gentlemen, don't do anything until I return." That's still a standing order at Fort Riley.
Oh, really?
So we're still waiting for him to come back before we do anything there. But anyhow, John applied for OCS, got OCS, and he retired as a 3-star.
Oh, wow.
He was the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Dixie, and retired as a 3-star. So he was at Fort Huachuca, the commandant of Fort Huachuca, and I gave him a call and said, "Hey, John, remember this exercise when you were with the Red Sox and everything?" And we just had a good 10-minute laugh over all that. It was something else.
I'm telling you, the stories that just traveling around, dealing with life, stuff that happens. I mean, I consider myself blessed. You know, we buried a lot of kids in my neighborhood. I grew up, as I'd mentioned, in a city, and it was ugly growing up. Um, and you know, the fact that I've lived long enough and healthy enough to see my three kids become three mostly useful adults, although they have their moments. And you know, you get to share stories like this and experience that stuff, man. That's those are little blessings that I think we watch the news a lot, and we collectively as people, we worry about the balloon and the Rona and this guy and that person, and we kind of sometimes forget those, you know, God's little blessings
Oh
kind of
yeah.
hit us, and we have to think about them after the fact a lot of the times.
Like this relationship, and like all the people who are supporting us by being here, whether it be on your channel or my channel, but just such a. I think we're creating our own little enclave of great people
I agree.
who are mutually supporting. Go ahead.
Oh no, I agree with you 100%. Um, and honestly, again, like, well, you and I need to get coffee at some point, but I got to meet Redleg out here. Houston and I got to
Yeah.
sit down, and what it was great. You know, we both just kind of snuck out of work for a bit, met at a cafe, and you know, chit chat. And I know there are a few other folks we're trying to meet up. Uh, I might actually be down in your neck of the woods in March sometime.
Okay,
So
we've got another guy here, Triple G Homestead, and he is just up the road about an hour. So maybe we could get all of us together at one time, and that would be phenomenal.
I
Uh,
bet you, I bet you Redleg would make a trip.
probably,
I've
probably.
learned the man
Um,
likes to road trip, especially when it's for fun. So,
yeah, he's something else. We've got to get his viewership up too.
oh yeah,
Uh, I think he's still under 500. And there's another good channel, a guy by the name of David Lynn Prepper Principal. And we need
oh,
to
I
get
haven't
his
heard of him.
channel up. And so we've got some good people here tonight. I noticed that people are putting down the number that they are subscribing. I noticed that Prepping by Faith had somebody that she said we need to get them over 1,000 tonight. Who was that? Prepping by Faith. I
Oh, let me
noticed that
look
you were
that up.
trying to really push to get that person over 1,000. Oh yeah, LaGuardia, LAX, Atlanta, LaGuardia, and Chicago are the worst. Midway was pretty good actually. I enjoyed Midway. Now O'Hare, yeah, it can be something else. Berlin is phenomenal, and I really love
Oh,
Berlin.
I agree. Berlin, Vienna,
Yes,
Amsterdam, those airports, the Germanic airports are really nice.
the one that got me. Have you ever been to Narita,
No.
Tokyo? So I was opening some factories in Penang, Malaysia for Dell, and they flew me to Tokyo, which is where Dell Asia Pacific headquarters was. Okay, Pepper My Faith says it was Carbon Q trying to get her to
Barbecue.
2,000. She's just so close. Yeah, we need to get her there if we can. And so then I landed in Narita, then I went to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong down to Penang, which is where the factories were. And so spent 6 months in Penang, back up to Tokyo. And oh my gosh, I needed an ice cream so bad. I went to the Ginza in Tokyo and paid, I don't know, 4,000 won or whatever it is for a little bitty 6-ounce Wendy's Frosty. And it wasn't until I got back to the hotel room and started doing my paperwork on expenses that I found out that I paid $22 for a 6-ounce Frosty,
Oh
but it was
wow.
worth it. But
I bet it was the best $22 ice cream you ever had, though.
oh yeah. So anyhow, um, Narita, you have to take a bullet train to get into Tokyo. It's outside the city limits, and Tokyo is
Oh
the
wow.
largest city in the world, right? So you got to take a bullet train to get out there in an hour and a half or whatever. And so I was sitting there waiting for my international flight, and they had all the restaurants upstairs. And I went upstairs to get a bowl of ramen, a bowl of
Yeah.
noodles. And so the guy took the bowl and dipped it into this big pot of ramen noodles, gave it to me. I sat there, I was eating it, and didn't eat it all. Had about it was about half done, and put my spoon down on the table. And the guy asked me if I was done. I said, "Yeah, I am." He took my bowl, went back over to the pot, poured what I hadn't eaten into the pot, rinsed off my plate, my bowl, and put it back in the stack of stuff to be eaten. I go, "Oh no, oh no!"
Was he
but
at least boiling that soup? Good Lord.
uh, but that was my experience at Narita.
Well, that's something else. I don't think I'd have eaten those noodles again.
No, it took a
Prepping my face.
while.
Ew.
So Carbon Q is currently at 1.99 thousand subs. I know I'm a subscriber, so
Oh yeah,
uh,
I should be as well.
okay, let me see. Jay Creature says in 2013 there was a 50-minute sniper attack against California power station. Made very little news. Now there's more in the news. Who would want us to plunge into the apocalypse? Well, Jay, let's go backwards. So I owned a shipping store, and it was a combination FedEx, UPS, USPS, and DHL. So I could ship any of those four shippers. And I owned that for 4 years. Before that, I was the HR director for the third largest homeless shelter in the US, and that's the Arch in downtown Austin. So that makes 7 years. And so before that, so 7 years ago, I sold the store over a year ago. So 8 years ago, I was in the electric power distribution industry. I was HR director for an electric co-op. And that year, there were 13 rifle attacks against substations, and they were all kept fairly quiet. So yes, there have been a lot of attempts to take out power stations, and I'm afraid that very soon they are going to be successful. And that is something that we need to prep for. So, if
Yep.
you can get yourself some generators or uh, solar systems, whatever alternative ways. Now, when I was younger and we built our fallout shelters, we had bicycle powered electricity. So there were two. There was a hand crank, and this was on an alternator, and the other one was you rode a bicycle, and the rear wheel powered an alternator, and that was your electricity. So we are so far ahead technologically over what it was when I was a young kid and first got involved in prepping. So, uh, you know, but do what you can. We are
Yep.
going to lose. Uh, uh, Pete, I mean, correct me here. I'm going to say we're going to lose electricity one way or the other within the next 2 years.
I think we will, and I think it won't be a very symmetric incident. It's going to be. My concern is it's going to vary from area to area, but I think the cities will likely be much worse off, largely because they don't have resources, they don't have space to maneuver, so to say. Um, the Texas grid is its own thing, and we all saw it get knocked out by a really bizarre set of storms. But at the same time, you have natural gas. We have a lot of gas power stations nearby. You have the people here, Oklahoma, Louisiana, who can reroute those pipelines, reroute that asset to a local grid and maybe power up a small city or power up a city hall. Um, you get into the bigger cities, my fear is imagine the Texas freeze, right? In 21, it knocked Texas offline. Imagine Chicago in the dead of winter goes offline for 2 weeks. You don't have enough guardsmen or responders to rescue everybody in those 50-story apartments.
No.
Um, People would die waiting for rescue. They would freeze to death. That scares the heck out of me.
Well, and I think one of the things you have to take into consideration is when we had the Texas grid failure, we were able to rotate availability of electricity throughout the
Right.
state. So, we were probably had 4 hours worth of electricity and then 12 hours off, and then 4 hours on, 12 hours off. Now, imagine that at a national level,
That would be
because
insane.
as consumption and as production start to wane, so it takes electricity, believe it or not, to make electricity.
Yep.
So you've got to have the electricity to route the pumping for the natural gas. If it's a natural gas induced generation system, we had a coal generation system that provided our co-op with electricity, and it was a very clean system. But they used a 7-mile long train of coal every day and a half.
Wow.
And so now then, so how are we going to get that coal into the production facility, into the generation facility, if you don't have the electricity to route the cars, if you don't have the electricity to unload the coal and
Yep.
load it into the hoppers for the generation system? So I mean,
Yep.
those are things people don't take into consideration. But once we start having a cascading failures, it's going to be like dominoes, and as one falls, it's going to topple another. And if they say that if you take out 6 key transmission or hyper substations,
You
that
could
you can take out
collapse
the entire grid.
most of the grid. Yeah, I've heard the same. Folks just need to be aware of that. And I think one of the things I guess, being in our community, um, when you see things happening, start deciding what exactly is happening. In other words, you start seeing those symptoms. Oh, the power went out. Well, it could just be a blackout, right? The breaker could have tripped. But you check the neighbor, you check your cell phone, there's no service, the street lights are out. Okay, wait a minute. You know, there's a period of time where if the grid were to go down, everybody would be kind of confused, and you want to be the one who realizes what's going on before everyone else. That way you can start doing whatever you need to do, because once the general public figures it out, it's going to be a mess.
Well, that's like I put out I don't know why I can't record anything recently, but I had to go to a live on Sunday to put it out. But a lot of people don't understand, but the water is stored. So we've got electricity, and the electricity runs a pump, and the pump runs it up the smaller pipe into a large water containment tower or a standpipe, either one. And standpipes are the round ones you just stick up in the air. There's pressurized water in a sense because it's a gravity feed system. So I'm gonna guess that probably for about 12 hours after electricity goes out, you're going to have water. So fill up anything. I think number one critical thing in an emergency is going to be water, above and beyond everything else, unless you have to protect against gas or radiation. But the number one prepper item you need in your kit is water. So if you're the number one person storing up on water, you're going to be the one who's going to survive. And that's my personal opinion. Yes, and Dragon Slayer has another good point here, and that is the electrical systems have to keep the rods cool. They operate the pumps to keep the cooling water
Yep.
going over the rods. Now, here's a misnomer, because when I was doing my HR consulting work, I did a lot of work for Pennsylvania Electric Power, PECO, Pennsylvania Electric Company, and I was working at Limerick, which is the last nuclear power plant brought online. They also owned Peach Bottom, which was the first one brought online, and they also owned 3 Mile Island. So those are the 3
Oh, wow.
nuclear power plants that they own. But most people don't realize, but 1/6 of the rods are taken out of service, out of the generation, and put into a cooling pond, because as they decay, they want to have a consistent rate of heat being produced inside the
Right.
generators. So they pull out 1/6 of those rods the oldest 1/6 every 3 years, basically, and set them into a cooling pond before they dispose of them. That's what you want to have, make sure is cooled, is because that cooling pond has far more radioactive rods than what you see in the power generation plant.
Oh yeah. And the nuclear power plants are even the refineries, right? You got to shut them down, but you're going to have chemicals sitting there, some of which are volatile. At some point, they will leak out. You don't have any fail safes, so that's not including the mess of logistics and vehicles trying to get from A to B. A lot of people, you'll often hear them say, um, well, the National Guard. Well, the National Guard consists of people like all of us, and they have to get to the armory.
Yeah.
And if everything's black and dark, they're going to have the same problem everyone else is to get to the armory in the first place. You're going to get some who'll make it, but how are you going to stand down orders? How are you going to uh, organize your personnel if you don't know how to get a hold of them?
Well,
So
the one thing that we have a neighborhood thing here, and uh, here in their city, where it just talks about all the different neighborhoods in the city, and everybody's complaining about the fact that the linemen aren't bringing because we got torn apart with the ice. It just really tore down our electricity like you would not believe. There's still something like 25,000 in Austin that don't have power right now. But I got tired of it, just people complaining. I said, "Look, guys," I said, "you didn't drive because it was too dangerous." So the power company has 8 trucks, 16 linemen. Okay, they're all at home when this happened, so they got to get in their own cars, take that treacherous drive to go get their truck, and with the um, I forget what we call them, the
the
boom.
cherry picker, yeah, I know
Yeah,
what
the
you're
cherry
talking about.
picker. And then they gotta take that cherry picker and drive it on those same ice roads to get to where you wanna go. Now, they're going to be in their gear, and they're going to go up 25, 35 feet in the air at 35-mile-an-hour winds in freezing rain, and you expect them to handle 7,200 volts of electricity uh, in a slippery, slidey cherry picker covered with ice while manipulating all the ice on the lines. I said, "Can you give them a little bit of a break and maybe understand that they only can work 16 hours a day and not 20?" But
Yeah, well,
that's just the way it is. Well,
yeah.
we've been on here over an hour. Golly. Okay, so Dragon Slayer says he was an Indian Point nuke plant, and you survived, Pete. We were guessing you'd probably only have a voice for about half an hour.
No, I made cinnamon tea with some unfiltered honey, and it seems to have done the trick. So
So Dragon Slayer's kind of agreeing with us, and
yeah,
he was talking about a lot of rods that are stored because they can't transport them that easily. And so where they do get rid of those is a facility here in the Panhandle of Texas, not too far from where Pete is, and so all those are put in this hole in the ground in Midwest Texas, and that's going to be terrible if that isn't kept cold. Okay, so I don't see any others. Prepping by Faith, Tofu, all of my mods, you guys did fantastic. Thank you for getting us as many people as we can. If you all don't mind, I would like to close this evening. Besides my normal uh, Sunday at Mass, we have 4 readings at Mass. And we have an Old Testament, we have a Psalms, we have a New Testament, and we have an epistle, and then we have a gospel. So we always have 4 biblical readings at Mass every Sunday. And this one from Isaiah, that was our Old Testament reading for this last Sunday, was just unbelievable. So I want to share it with you. And let me see, that's second reading, responsorial, Psalm responsorial. Okay, first reading, Isaiah 58, 7 through 10. Thus says the Lord, share your bread with the hungry, shelter the oppressed and the homeless, clothe the naked when you see them, and do not turn your back on your own. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your wound will quickly be healed. Your vindication shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer, and you shall cry for help, and the Lord will say, here I am. If you remove from your midst oppression, false accusation, and malicious speech, and if you bestow your bread on the hungry and satisfy the afflicted, then light shall rise for you in the darkness, and the gloom shall become for you like midday. So that's kind of reinforced with James 2, verses 14 through 24, that says, we've got an obligation. We've got to take care of each other. We've got to help each other. And that's why I'm going to let Pete say final words, and I'm going to close with my famous "We're all in this together" speech. So, Pete.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. That's a lot of the reason why many of us do what we do. This isn't one of those hustles you do for money. If anything, you get a lot of hate going on social media and telling people things, but you also find people who are of the same spirit as you. And to be able to give comfort or even enlightenment to someone, or get enlightenment myself, I guess this, in a strange way, you're shining uh, that light of righteousness upon each other using this medium of the social media platform. So, you guys and girls, you're doing what you're doing. Keep doing it. Keep sharing with each other, because somebody somewhere is going to be helped by it.
And I saw a comment earlier before, and thank you very much for the compliment. And you were complimenting both of us, but I just want to share with you. There are plenty of you out there who are very intelligent, have a lot of experience, have a lot of knowledge, have a lot that you need to share with us, because Pete has his strengths. I have my strengths. I have my weaknesses. I don't know if Pete has any weaknesses or not, but I know I have plenty of them. So, there are those of you out there who are strong where I am weak, and it just so happens I'm strong where you're weak, and that's why you think that maybe I have something that you don't. But please remember that we're all in this together, so we can come out the other side together. Please be kind, polite, and respectful to each other, because togetherness is the key. Take care, y'all. Thank you for being here.
You
Have a
guys be
great evening.
safe.
Bye-bye.